I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14, joined by a special guest and a good friend, Tony Basilio. We are talking Tennessee football today. We are continuing our offseason look at every program, and we are doing this on January the 19th. So if you watch this in March and April and something's happened and changed, we're not stupid. We're just doing this in January. And to join us, Tony Basilio, who knows Tennessee football about as well as anybody. Thanks for joining us today, Tony.
Hey, thank you, Chris. It's an honor. Really appreciate your work and have for years.
Well, thank you. Let's talk about the Vols. 2 years ago, I don't think anybody would have foreseen how quickly Josh Heupel resurrected this program. Big
Right.
win in the Orange Bowl. And I look ahead to 2023. I look at some teams that have lost a lot of players across the league. And really, no, there was one big loss at quarterback. But Tennessee returns a lot of guys who made a lot of plays in an Orange Bowl championship year.
You know, I was going through with a good friend of mine, just looking at their lineup a few minutes ago before we jumped on here, and it's interesting. You know, it's been 2 years as we record here. It's been 2 years and 1 day since Jeremy Pruitt was fired. I almost said retired, but since he was fired, which seems inconceivable that in 24 short months and a couple of days you could come as far as they have. You could almost make the case that going into next season, Tennessee's in the top 4, top 5 in the league. And it looked like they were going to be in the bottom 5 for many, many years to come. Josh Heupel's been a revelation here. They've developed some players. And now with Nico on their roster, hopes are extremely high, as they should be. I don't know about this next upcoming season, but they are poised recruiting-wise. It's an extremely healthy time here.
Well, let's talk about quarterback, right? And look, I'm not warranting that they are better for losing Hendon Hooker because I don't think they are. But it was always interesting to me that if you looked at the stats, Joe Milton actually statistically outperformed Hendon Hooker. Now, look, some of that was garbage time. And people have discounted the Orange Bowl, and I know that at times he overthrows guys and all sorts of stuff, right? But it was very interesting to me. He didn't throw a pick last year. He's got a cannon for an arm, and when he played very well. Is he turned a corner? Is this a mirage? I know a lot of people are skeptical, but when you watch him play, he looked pretty good to me.
And you know, Chris, I don't know how you'd answer that because it's almost like, I know you're a big baseball guy. The sample size, as we say in baseball, is too small in that bowl game. I mean, this is a guy that lost his job at Michigan, lost his job at Tennessee, his first year on campus. But as you say, the last exposure to him and heading into spring ball, the hopes are high for him that he can be a representative starting quarterback in this league. Now, is he going to play to Hendon Hooker's level? Probably not. Truth is, anybody that starts in a Josh Heupel offense puts up video game numbers. I mean, that's the way it's gone. That's the way it went back to Missouri. It's the way it's went just about every year. Well, every year at Central Florida. And then in Knoxville, thus far, through 2 seasons, it's been pretty much video game numbers in this league as a head coach as well. So the thing about Joe Milton is that he is such a beloved member of the team. He handled his demotion so well. He's such a team guy in a me guy era that it makes him really easy to root for. And he's beloved. He's beloved in this community. He's beloved by his teammates. He's beloved by the fans. But he's got a 5-star guy that they paid 7 figures breathing down his back. And, you know, how long can he hold on to his job in the fall? We'll find out.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. Do you have, I mean, it's impossible, but do you have a gut feeling on how this plays out?
No, because I really think in a perfect world, Joe Milton comes prepared to be the starting quarterback in 2023, handles it well, plays very well. Say they throw up a 9-3, 10-2 type season, which would be a tremendous answer to what happened in 2022. And then you get Nico an opportunity to sit for a year, which means you'd have him for a couple of years, and then you hit the ground running in 2024 with an opportunity to probably compete for a league championship, they would hope. Tennessee, this recruiting class really added to their secondary, a ton of young secondary help coming in, and that's really their need area. But Nico, my early returns from people I trust, and look, Chris, I had somebody tell me, is kind of old school like I am, I don't go for all the flash and the hype. And after a while, you see it enough and you're just kind of like, whatever, show me on the field. One of my sources told me, said, Tony, I'm like you, and just told me I wanted so hard not to believe. Saw him in practice because they let him go through bowl practice. Said from the minute he walked on the field, he was unreal and just ripping their first team defense apart as a third team scout team quarterback. Said he was and said he was very deferential toward Joe Milton. He's been on the phone a bunch with Hendon Hooker during that time, and said each time he went out to the practice field just looked a little better and better, to the point where looked extremely natural. And the picture that was painted to me was that Joe Milton better come ready in the fall, in this upcoming fall, or he's got a guy that I don't think they'd be afraid to insert. But Chris, in a perfect world, Nico's too skinny. He's a tall beanpole kid. Young guys like that in this league, it's a man's league. And we know that. It's sports at the highest level outside the NFL. And I don't think you want to throw a true freshman in there from the get-go in this spot, or even a few games into the season.
Well, whoever the quarterback is, they've got some company. I mean, I'm looking at the stat sheet. Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, who had some productive years, and I think Dylan Sampson back too. Of course, Milton, if he's the guy, can run it a little bit. Receivers, I mean, I know they lose Hyatt and Tillman, but Brew McCoy, Ramel Keaton, Squirrel White. They picked up a transfer from Oregon that I would still think that's one of the top receiving groups in the league. They return about as many skill position guys at running back and receiver. I know they lost some big ones, but they've got a lot of guys who have produced a lot against SEC teams.
Well, they do. And this Tennessee team is, the thing about this offense is everybody's productive in it.
Yeah.
It was really curious to me that in the bowl game, Dylan Sampson, who you mentioned, who they love, did not get a carry. They let him return the ball on a kickoff. But, you would think that in a bowl game type situation, those are exhibition games. You would think you'd give him a carry, and they didn't. And I don't know what to make of that, because I think he's their most talented runner from scrimmage. I think he catches the ball well out of the backfield as well. But for whatever reason, he didn't get a carry. Well, I know the reason, and Tennessee fans know the reason. It's because he struggles in pass protection. You would think, though, that in a sophomore year, that will all be behind him. I think he's the most talented guy in that offensive backfield. And I would think that if he can get that down, earn the trust of his quarterbacks, earn the trust of his coaches, because he about got whomever the quarterback was back there, he really whiffed on some blocks this year and about got his quarterback hurt a couple of times.
Yeah, that'll get you yanked for sure.
Yes.
Speaking of blocking, they lose Darnell Wright, who was, I guess, their best offensive lineman, but they get 4/5 of them back. They had a transfer from Texas.
Right.
Not often you keep an offensive line that intact with that much experience. That's another selling point for this Tennessee offense this next year.
And Chris, the thing about this offense is that it's a pretty offensive line friendly system they run. So it isn't like you're asking them to do a tremendous. You're not asking You're not asking them to learn a tremendous amount. Last year, they plugged and played a guy from Florida who really was pretty indistinguishable at Florida, was better at Tennessee than he was at Florida. This time around, I think that Tennessee will be okay on the offensive line. The questions for this football team reside on defense.
Yeah.
And they're going to. and they're going to in the next season.
Well, and that's where we're going next. And just for an overview, okay, I'm looking at the tackle sheet from last year.
Yeah.
Top 2, Aaron Beasley, Jalen McCullough, both back. Tamarian McDonald, who was number 4 in tackles, back.
Yep.
Kamal Haddon, who was number 6, back. Roman Harrison, who was 8.
Yeah.
Page, Walker, Charles, I think those guys back as you go down the list. They lose their number 3 tackler in Flowers, their number 5 in Banks.
Mm-hmm.
Their number 7 in Juwan Mitchell, and their number 9 in Byron Young, who, Banks and Young and Flowers all will be NFL draft type prospects. And I always said this, if you judge defenses by old school metrics, by yards allowed and total, Tennessee didn't look great, but they play a lot of plays. When you look per snap, that defense wasn't nearly as bad as people thought. Shut Vanderbilt out. Had some games. I mean, the Clemson game was what it was, but I don't think this defense was as bad as people made it out to be at times. I mean, heck, even Georgia got ripped a time or two, right? That's just this day and age in college football. What do you make of them next year?
I think they're going to probably have to get younger. And I think in their secondary, they're going to get a little younger. They've picked up a transfer who used to be at Vanderbilt by way of BYU.
That's right. That was today. Gabe Judulali.
Who I'm sure who picked the ball off against Tennessee as a freshman, who they think will be an upgrade over what was there. Tennessee just doesn't have much speed in their secondary. Now, they've signed 3 to 4 young guys. They may add somebody else from the portal. You talk about people finding this down the line. Perhaps somebody viewing this in the spring will go, oh, well, they did add somebody. Maybe a couple more. There is a huge help wanted sign there. And the thing Tennessee pitched to the kids that they signed was not only some money in the NIL world, which everybody does that these days in the halves of the SEC. Everybody's doing that. But it was really playing time. And it was the opportunity that, hey, as a youngster, you come in here dialed in and you'll get an opportunity. And Chris, I watching Tennessee down in and down out, you are right. I mean, there were games where the Pittsburgh game and the Clemson game were wonderful ways to sandwich the season. At times, though, in their secondary, they just couldn't run.
Yeah.
And when you can't run in this league, I mean, you're going to get exploited. Now, not everybody had a quarterback that was on Tennessee's schedule last year to do it, but the teams that did hurt them. Like you mentioned Georgia. Georgia played cat and mouse with Tennessee last year. Tennessee went into that game undefeated. And the thought being, we're going to be a live dog in Sanford Stadium. And Georgia could have done to Tennessee what they did to TCU in that bowl game. I mean, that's just the reality of it. They decided not to because it's a league. It's a league team, and they're on their schedule every year. And I think Kirby Smart has a certain amount of respect for Josh Heupel in terms of what is happening here right now. So you don't want to exacerbate anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But the South Carolina game was extremely ugly. And Tennessee's one of their main holes is going to be in that linebacking core with Banks leaving. Who's going to be my playmaker? Now, they have another BYU transfer they're plugging in at linebacker. You talked about Mitchell. What Tennessee did is behind the scenes, Mitchell was kind of a headache. So they made a trade. And the trade they made was, you're going to go. We're going to bring the guy in from BYU. And Chris, it's wild in the Southeastern Conference right now. You guys talk about this, but it's so professional all of a sudden.
Yeah.
That you literally just go, okay, you go, you come, you go, you come, and it's just, and these folks are managing rosters now.
Yeah. You and I could do 2 hours on that one alone.
Yeah.
We won't do that now. And I hate it, by the way.
Yeah.
But it is what it is until they make some changes. And I think they will one day. But
sure.
Okay. I've seen some polls, or they're not polls, but they're rankings in media outlets. I've seen Tennessee maybe around 10, give or take a couple spots. I've heard people say that's too high. And I get you lose a Hendon Hooker, you have some questions on defense, but I look around at what they have, what they bring back, the fact that I think continuity matters. It seems like they've got a pretty decent culture up there from what I can tell. It's player friendly.
Yeah.
I don't think a top 10 or higher to me, looking what they have, and I've looked at some other rosters, that doesn't seem out of line to me, Tony. Am I crazy, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, to start the year, sure, why not? I think Tennessee would be hard-pressed, and people don't want to hear this. Look, a lot of changes, young team. I think if they went 9-3 next year, that would be a wonderful result.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance they go 8-4. I mean, who knows? It's a team on offense. You make great points, about what's there offensively, but yet your quarterback situation, even with Joe Milton, is an unknown. It's simply an unknown. Because if Joe Milton simply can't do it, or goes into overthrow mode that you were talking about as we were discussing off the outside of our conversation here, if he goes into overthrow mode, Chris, at that point, you're looking at putting a true freshman out there. And this league is not kind to true freshmen. It's just not. Even the most talented of true freshmen, this is a tough proposition. But, then you look around the league right now and you go, okay, well, who's going to beat
uncertainty.
You? Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. So I guess it's all relative. 10 preseason sounds a little too high to me. Somewhere between, if you want to go, say, I'm just off the top of my head, spitballing here, if you want to go 15 to 25, I could probably buy that. But, you look at college football, somebody's got to be in the top 10. That's one thing we learned is you can go from here to here very quickly. And we looked around and we were like, how in the world are we 5 in America, 4 in America, 3? And then when they did that first reveal that night, I'll never forget, we were sitting in here doing a show that night, an immediate reaction. And people were calling in going, we just saw our program up there as number 1 in America. Yeah. And Chris, it was wild. So somewhere in that, I would say 15 to 25 range would be my guess is where the season ends up next year. Personally, I don't think it's fair to go to Josh Heupel, kind of like a salesperson. This is the way this is my analogy. They go out and have a great year. They had one account spend a bunch of money with them, right? All of a sudden, the goals at the home office go through the roof. I don't think it's fair to do that to this guy based on the fact that he got a team to overachieve. And they got that team to overachieve in 2022 to say, hey, by the way, we want you back in the top 10 in 2023. I think there are too many variables.
Well, and cover this team as well as anybody. I think if Tennessee fans are watching, they know who you are. But for anybody that doesn't know who you are and where to find your stuff, let's leave that with our audience before we end this today.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity, Chris. And again, I think the world of you. tclub.team is my website. Again, tclub.team. What we do every day is I have a blog up there, and we put a couple thousand words up every day dealing with Tennessee, dealing with the Southeastern Conference. We cover all the sports. We're extremely excited about the upcoming baseball season, which is something people like you have gotten me into with your fervor and love for that, for the sport of college baseball. And I thank you for that, for kind of shepherding me along, Chris. You've been wonderful down through the years. But tclub.team is where you find us. And then we do post-game shows. We do a show after each and every basketball game. We do one after each and every football game and after some baseball games. So you can tell by looking at me, I'm pretty worn at this point.
He is Tony Basilio. He's a legend in the city of Knoxville and around that program. Well, it's true. Hey, Tony, thank you for joining us today. It's Chris. Always fun. And I am certain we'll have you on again.
Thank you, my man.
All right. We're doing one of these for every SEC team. So we either have gotten to your team by the time you see this, or we're going to be getting there. Best way to do that, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps us too. Anyway, I'm Chris Lee. He's Tony Basilio. This is Southeastern 14. We'll see you again soon.